I'm Joseph Alleman. I'm a Utah artist, watercolor, oil painter. I've been painting for 15 years or so, 10 years professionally. I always had an interest in art. As far as what inspires me, I would say, there's been a real evolution as far as me personally as an artist in the last 10 years or so since I've been out of school. Originally, I saw myself as somebody who was more of a figurative painter. As a student, that was something that interested me, and it seemed to be something that was a way to kind of test your skills, your ability. And as far as the landscape and a lot of the things that I kind of relate to now as an artist, to me those types of subjects seemed almost too obvious, and it was only later on that I realized that really everything that you're painting as an artist is really just your observations, and if that's what you're seeing, then you start to see paintings in things that are kind of common, kind of normal. As I began to move away from painting people, as I graduated, I wasn't in the academic setting where somebody was bringing in a model once a week or regularly, and it just wasn't something that was part of my surroundings anymore. I started to really kind of just look and figure out where I was, and I started to see paintings in things that I hadn't really paid a lot of attention to before. Originally, we were in a town where there were a lot of old pioneer, kind of early settler homes just kind of scattered throughout the city, and I found a lot of inspiration going around painting these old homes. I was fascinated by the geometry, the way the homes would kind of incorporate into the landscape. It kind of reached a point where painting homes became a little bit predictable. The one thing that I found always unique, always changing, was the settings that these homes were in. A storm would roll through, or the seasons would change. You'd wake up one morning and there's snow covering everything, and that was really what made the painting. The landscape kind of took the leading role, and it was during that process that I really find inspiration in great landscape work. At any given point, I've usually got 3 or 4 paintings going. Typically a few oil paints and typically a few watercolors. A typical morning, I'll come out to the studio and preferably get an early start. I'm kind of a morning person. Occasionally taking a break to waste a little time or just stretch out a little bit, and usually come out in the evening again within a few hours, just kind of wrapping things up and kind of preparing for the next day. As far as the career as an artist, it's an interesting line that you find yourself walking. You want to be true to yourself. You want to be true to the things that you find inspiration in. At the same time, there's the business side of things that you've got to keep the lights on. You've got to pay the bills. You've got to be able to buy your frames and your materials. And the collectors don't want to see that side of you as an artist, but it's a big part of who you are, is walking this line between keeping the gears moving and keeping your mind fresh and your stress level at a point where you can come out and enjoy a day in the studio and really get into your work without being too distracted by the more mundane side of making a living at whatever it is you're doing. As far as working at home, which is where my studio is located, it's an ideal situation. It allows me flexibility to be with my family and to put the hours in studio-wise that are often required when you have deadlines and things of that nature. It's hard to separate your work life from your personal life, because prior to labeling yourself as a professional artist, most painters, painting was something that they did all the time because it's what they wanted to be doing anyways, and so it's a little difficult to kind of define the parameters between having your identity as an artist, having your identity in whatever other roles you have. In my case, being a husband, being a father. Luckily I have a wife that kind of helps me figure out how to define those roles. As far as painting on location versus painting in the studio, I spend most of my time in the studio. It's just a very comfortable environment. I can get a little music going. I can get the temperature where it needs to be, and just create a really comfortable setting that allows me to be productive, which ultimately is what's most important. And from time to time, there are those days where you just can't get going for whatever reason. You find yourself distracted, and those are the days that I find myself wanting to kind of pack everything up and take it on location. Not so much to try to capture something that I wouldn't capture in the studio. Not that isn't a possibility, but more just to keep me stimulated mentally. Sometimes you just crave the experience of being so close to your subject matter, just being in the environment. And while you're out and about, a lot of times that's a great opportunity to capture a few photographs or whatever whatever will be helpful when you wake up the next morning and you're ready to get going in the studio again. So I find myself getting out quite a bit for no reason other than it's just a stimulating environment. You're kind of at one with your subject matter. There's a certain element to that that's really exhausting. I mean, when you're sitting out in the sun, out in the wind, some guys are just able to do that day after day. For me, the experience, it's a very rich experience, and it's something that I bring back. I hopefully bring back some of that into the studio and portray that energy, kind of bottle some of that and have that carry through in my studio work as well. As far as ideas and where the concepts, where the imagery comes from, a lot of it is imagery that you collectively kind of gather in your mind over time. Sometimes you'll paint something and you'll kind of just make a mental note to come back and revisit that subject because you enjoyed it, or maybe it didn't turn out quite the way you wanted it to, and so you're thinking that there's potential here that is untapped, and I'd like to take on that challenge at some other point. But so much of what is inspiring is just the things that you're seeing all the time, every day, and it's just a matter of kind of shifting gears mentally and just paying attention to those things in a different way. I mean, there's things that I'll see them 100 times, and maybe it's the weather, maybe it's the lighting or the time of the day or something about it, or maybe it's just the mindset that I'm in, where I'm actually looking at my environment and looking for that inspiration and hoping to find it. For whatever reason, it's the things that maybe I've overlooked 100 times, 200 times, and all of a sudden they speak to me on a different level. There's a painting there, and you recognize that, and you're excited to capture that and interpret that. Sometimes it is just imagery that's non-specific. Maybe I mean, there's something about sitting down with a sketch pad and just drawing whatever comes out, and as it comes out, turning the page and refining that original sketch, and then turning the page again and refining that revision until all of a sudden you have something that deserves to be captured in on canvas or in paint. I'm Joseph Alleman, and I'm a painter.